Hi everyone, this is Jim. Welcome to this postmortem of my Blitz game number 532. My opponent played e4, and I decided to play knight f6, the Alekhine's defense. It's an interesting counter-attacking opening, putting immediate pressure on the center and encouraging the pawns to come forward. The general idea is to try and get white to overextend and then to counterattack the center. So the knight goes to d5, it wants to stay active. So d4, normal move, and d6. So there's the first of the undermining moves going after, putting a little tension on the center. Now knight f3 is, I think that's called the modern line. That's the main way of playing here. But c4 is also a good, respectable way of playing. I play that way myself. Knight goes back to b6. It drives the knight back to a square where it's really not so well placed. And then we can continue with f4, the four pawns attack, although that's considered somewhat risky for white, actually. Or you continue with e takes d6. That's the way I play it. And then knight f3, which my opponent played. It's not so common in the opening book, but you see it's a fine move. It's just sort of deferring this exchange in the center and holding on to it for a little bit. But it gives me an opportunity where black can take the e-pawn at the right moment. But I didn't fully exploit that. Let's see, I brought my bishop out to pin the knight, which is fine, and he unpins with bishop e2. And yeah, right here, taking the pawn is a good idea. I can force some trades and get kind of a pretty good position out of it. So if I take, he can, that's interesting, he can push on with c5. I was expecting, yeah, knight takes, bishop takes. This wins a pawn. That's one point. When the queen takes back over here, if the king had taken back, then obviously white would lose castling privileges. But when the queen takes back, it leaves the d-pawn undefended. And now this is a pawn sacrifice that white has sacrificed a pawn, but he has compensation in the form of good development. He's got open lines for his bishop and easy development, and I'm a little bit behind. But I have a pawn, so an interesting way to play, and okay for both sides. So that would have been interesting. After, let's see, after d takes, let's take one more look at this. Instead of knight takes, which basically is a pawn sack, if he takes with a pawn, I guess I trade queens, and that will benefit black in some way. Let's take a look at that. He takes, I take. He can take back with the bishop, so he doesn't have to lose castling privileges. And then develops, oh, it's my turn. Knight takes c4. Yeah, another pawn is hanging. That's interesting. So an example, I guess, of how white already is a bit overextended. So after, take a third look at this. After d takes e5, the best response is, well, okay, you can go for one of those pawn sack lines, or you can push on with c5, kick this knight around a little bit, and e4 counterattacking the other knight. So it would lead to complications, but that's an interesting example of the kind of the typical strategies in the Alekhine, going for this counterattack on the center. And you know, it's pretty remarkable how quickly this structure can fall apart in the right cases, in the right circumstances. Anyway, I played the more common move here, which is e6. But I already had a bit of a misconception. I was thinking if he takes the d-pawn, I was going to take back with the bishop. But of course, that walks into this fork. So there's no point to this idea of taking back with the bishop. I'm always going to have to be taking back with the pawn there. So after he castles, let's see, he could take here right away, and I would take back with a pawn, but he castled. I might as well play the move bishop e7 and just develop and prepare to castle. I played the move knight to c6 here, still thinking that I had this bishop takes d6, and I wanted to get it in one move. But I'm never going to be taking there with the bishop as long as this knight is here on b6. So it was wrong thinking on my part. So when he takes, I at least recognized at this point that I have to take back with a pawn and not walk into that fork. And now he pushed on with d5, a very interesting way to play. And let's see, we're getting out of the opening book here. I can either take right away or take the knight. I chose to take the knight. He took back with the bishop. And now I missed a second point here, which is this bishop has got pressure along this diagonal, looking indirectly at the b7 pawn. And I just walk right into this tactic. I play knight to e5. and then he can clear that diagonal with tempo. So what I really need to do is I need to take that pawn, and if he takes back with a pawn, then I can play knight e5, and his bishop is blocked on that diagonal, so that's okay. And if he takes back with the bishop, then I can just leave the knight there, and the knight is in between the bishop and the pawn, so the pawn is protected that way. But the way I played it, I played knight e5, and now he can clear the diagonal with tempo. It's kind of a nice tactic. You should always be looking at these things. So that diagonal is suddenly cleared, and I can't, I have no intermediate move here to block it because he can take on f7 with check. So I need to really take back here. And then white is just up a pawn, and I am just worse here. I think white is winning the rest of the game, except for there is one moment where I have a chance to equalize, which is kind of interesting. So let's I'll point that out when we get to it. So bishop to a6, bishop e7. We can do subnormal development. He throws in this check. I block with the knight, and I'm bringing this knight over because I have ideas maybe of using it on the king side or in the center. He goes queen h5 check, developing all his pieces with threats. I go knight to g6, blocking it. And now he goes rook e1. And now here's an interesting moment. This isn't the moment I was referring to earlier. There's actually a better opportunity to equalize. But this actually is an interesting moment too, where I could get a better position than I had in the game anyway, by just going ahead and castling and sacrificing this pawn here. I didn't realize, but I don't really need to defend that. I thought I had to defend it, and I played e5. But if I had just castled here, and he takes the pawn. It's not even the best move to take the pawn. The problem is knight d5, and this rook has no way out of that little box there. So let's see, play might continue, say knight c3, queen to c8, hitting the rook. And there's just no good defense for that rook. That's just funny. So his best thing to do is to sack the exchange here, and then h takes, and then the queen retreats. Maybe that wasn't best. What? Maybe knight takes is a little better. It still leaves, okay. The chess engine is just changing its mind about it. Still seems to leave white with some advantage, but I have won the exchange. White has a pawn for the exchange and some activity, but that would have been an interesting way to get back into the game, but I didn't spot that idea. Okay, I played e5. He went knight c3, castles, knight to d5, cancel, knight to d5, sorry. I go knight to c5, and now he played the move knight to b4. So before I put that on the board, if you want to undertake a tactics quiz, can you figure out what black should play after the move knight b4 to take advantage of that? It's a bit of a mistake, and black has one good move after knight b4. I will say before I stop talking and give you a chance to pause the video that it's a pretty deep tactic. But if you want to stop the video and think about it for a while, it's kind of interesting. Okay, I'm going to give the answer away. I played knight b4, and here I have the move a6, and it's an interesting line. It looks like, well, one idea is that if he takes, then I can just take the knight. So there's kind of a pin along this diagonal where the bishop is pinned. But the line you have to consider is, what about knight takes? If you just grab that pawn with the knight, and here's the tactical point. You exchange off here, and then you play queen to b6, hitting the bishop, but also looking at the f7 pawn and threatening actually a mate because this rook is undefended on the e1 square. So you're threatening the bishop and you're threatening the mate. So for example, bishop here, queen takes f2 check is mate in 2, king over there. So that's the tactical point there. Let's see, what's the best move after queen b6? It is bishop to e3. Okay, hitting the queen and just giving up the bishop here. So anyway, that was my one chance to get back in the game. After a6, we'll take one more look at this. After a6, his best move is not to take that pawn at all, but to counterattack with the knight. So this is the best variation for white, best play for white. Counterattacking the queen moves. He's going to win the exchange here. But after I take the bishop, his knight ends up being trapped here. He can either take the pawn immediately and I'll take the knight, or if he plays some other move, then or if he tries to move the knight away. Yeah, there's no square the knight has. So I end up getting 2 pieces for the rook, and that's how I get back into the game. So interesting tactic after knight b4 that I missed that, and then it's downhill from here. Let's see, I play knight f4. I'm trying to kind of stir up a little bit of trouble. I know I'm down in material. I want to open up some lines around the king if I can. He trades here. I come back with the rook. I'm planning to double on the f-file. He goes knight to c6, coming in and attacking my queen. Yeah, I had to overlook that. Queen f8 puts a little pressure here, but after he takes my rook, I really need to take back. I don't have time to play, for example, rook takes f2. It's not forcing enough. Doesn't make any big threats. And now he just drops his queen back. I mean, that's not technically the best move here, but a practical decision. Just consolidate. The queen is also looking to re-enter the game on the d5 square. He's got a material win here. He's up the exchange plus a pawn, and that's enough material to win a game. So he just really needs to consolidate and hold on, force some trades, and he's got to win. So let's see, I go for f-file counterplay. He throws in the check. And rook to f1, defends the f pawn. I go knight e4, trying to pile up on that pawn, and he plays g3, kicking my rook. And once again, there's no time for me to grab on f2. That leaves the knight hanging after some exchanges there. So what can I do? Knight to f6. Yeah, I tried moving the knight with a tempo on the queen, because if the rook moves away, the knight was hanging. So I'm trying to save myself here. The queen comes into e6, bring my rook over here. But now he can force some more trades with this move. Didn't really have anything better than taking. But all these trades bring white closer to the win. Let's see, knight e4. I'm still trying for counterplay on f2, but he plays f5. And let's see, I went knight c5 here. Goes queen g4. Try opening up some lines here, but he plays this nicely. He plays rook f1, pinning the pawn, so he doesn't have to take back with the pawn. So no lines opened against his king. Now let's see, I move my queen. He takes with the queen in this case, and now he's starting to get some mating ideas. He has some pressure along the f-file here. Let's see, I come in with knight e6, defending and attacking. Goes queen to f7, and now the knight goes to g5, hitting my knight, so I need to move that to a square where it's safe. Queen over to d5, and I went queen b6 check, and after c5, I play the losing move. I mean, I'm losing anyway, but I needed to play queen takes c5 and get queens off, but that loses just by the preponderance of material, and white is up a whole piece at this point. So I took with the pawn, and now there's a very nice mate in 3 here, taking advantage of my weak back rank. He played queen a8 check, and if I block with the queen, he's just going to trade queens and then come down with the rook. So I blocked with the bishop instead. It's same result, just a little bit quicker. Rook f8 is mate, and that's how the game ended. Anyway, interesting game. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Leave any comments you have in the section below, and I will see you again soon.